Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Lauren. I'm the Community Programs Manager here at Essex Market. I'm really excited to welcome you today to our program in partnership with Tenement Museum. I'm here with Sobeida De La Cruz.
Hi.
Sobeida is the owner of Viva Fruits and Vegetables, one of the grocery and produce markets here at the historic Essex Market. And today we have a really exciting program for you, Becoming Loisaida. This is going to be about all the different Spanish Caribbean communities that we have here on the Lower East Side of New York City and how they evolved and came to be a really central part of our community here. Sobeida and I are going to be demonstrating a family recipe of hers. But before that, I want to pass it over to Kat Lloyd from the Tenement Museum, who's going to share a story right over on Orchard Street, just a few blocks away from Essex Market, and give us a better context of the different immigration stories here in the Lower East Side. So with that, Kat, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thanks so much, Lauren and Sobeida. It's an honor to be with you here. And welcome, everyone. We're so glad you joined us for our event celebrating Lower East Side History Month in May. So just a couple of things to know. We want to hear from you. I see folks still already using the chat. So please let us know your connections, your questions. There's a Q&A box specifically for any questions, and then a chat to just talk to each other, build some community as we're here during our program tonight. So I'll share a little bit to start us out about the Tenement Museum, and then share a specific story of one of the former residents of our museum buildings that can help us understand the history of Spanish Caribbean communities here in the neighborhood. So probably many of you are familiar, but the Tenement Museum, we are located in two historic tenement buildings on the Lower East Side. They're both on the same block of Orchard Street, just south of Delancey. On the left, you see 97 Orchard Street, where the Tenement Museum began in 1988. And on the right is 103 Orchard Street, where the Tenement Museum began telling stories in 2011. So between these two buildings, we tell the stories of 10 different families who lived in these buildings. And we tell the stories, these are all stories of real people. That's really what the Tenement Museum does. Here we see photographs of some of the people that we talk about in our two tenement buildings. People who lived in the neighborhood as early as the 1860s to people like Ramonita Rivera Saez, who we'll talk about tonight, who lived in the neighborhood all the way through the 20th century. So we cover at the museum a lot of history of this neighborhood, really looking at the different people and communities that have impacted the Lower East Side over time. And we tell these stories through primary sources and records, and where we can through the memories of people directly. So tonight we'll actually get to hear a little bit from some of Ramanita Rivera Saez's family members and what they remember about her experience in the neighborhood. So at the museum, we tell stories really of migration, right? Of people who moved here from other places to start the next chapter of their life in the Lower East Side. So these stories take place in both of these buildings, but tonight we'll be looking at Ramonita Rivera Saez's story in 103 Orchard Street. These two spaces that you see here on the right were Ramonita's home in 103 Orchard Street. She lived in this tenement building for about 50 years, from 1964 all the way through 2013, when she moved back to Puerto Rico. So in thinking about the history of Spanish Caribbean communities here, we really cherish Ramonita's story to help us understand the long impact of Spanish-speaking people in this neighborhood. So Ramonita, let me show you a better photo now of her living room. We've recreated her home using some photographs that were donated to us by the family. So here you can see Ramonita. This was the intro image for our event tonight. And you can see this is the inspiration for recreating this living room. Here she's standing very proudly with her hand on a television set. She's on the phone. And she's wearing sort of an immaculate light blue, very closely tailored dress. And this image we think is really emblematic of Ramonita. Ramonita, she arrives in New York City from Ciales, Puerto Rico in the year 1955. And she gets a job very quickly in the garment industry, sewing clothes. This was a really common job for Puerto Rican women, women from the Dominican Republic who are arriving to the Lower East Side in the middle of the 20th century. So Ramonita here is impeccably dressed. She knew clothes from both making them and wearing them. And she moves into this building, 103 Orchard Street, in 1964 with her two sons. We see here, Jose and Andy Velez. This is them in their high school graduation portrait from the summer of 1968. So we're coming up on graduation time. It's that time of year right now. So it makes me think of the summer of 1968 when Jose and Andy are graduating, and the proudness Ramonita must have felt in celebrating this moment that her sons are achieving. So Ramonita, she lives in this apartment with Jose, Andy, and her husband Frank, the boy's stepson. So they're a family of four living in this apartment, and Ramonita and her family, they're part of really this transformation of the Lower East Side into a neighborhood with many more Spanish speakers, and really the emergence of strong, Puerto Rican and Dominican Spanish-speaking communities here in the neighborhood. So to give us a little more context for that, I want to take us to the kitchen. So here we see we've recreated Ramonita's kitchen with light pink walls. You see a stove on the right, her sink and refrigerator on the left, and some of the ways that she would decorate her home to kind of bring the spirit of Puerto Rico into her space. And Ramonita, she was not, of course, alone in really bringing her Puerto Rican identity to her home and to the neighborhood. Here is a photograph, one of my favorites that the museum has in our collection. This is of Orchard and Delancey Street in the 1960s. Unfortunately, we don't know the exact year. But many of you will recognize the Williamsburg Bridge directly ahead of us. And this block is right across the street from where Ramonita and her family live. And we can see just in the people in this image, really some of the ways that the Lower East Side had changed by the middle of the 20th century. The neighborhood had become much more racially and culturally diverse by the mid 60s. And, the story of Puerto Rican and Dominican communities coming here is really the story of much larger migration patterns. So just briefly for the census nerds out there, I wanted to show you sort of some of the census information for how this particular portion of the Lower East Side has changed over time. Um, what we're looking at is the information for just the census tract where the Tenement Museum buildings are, and actually where the Essex Street Market buildings were. So the market and the buildings for the museum are in the same census tract. And we see 1950 to 1970, the growth of, the communities of people of color, additional migrants and immigrants coming to the neighborhood. So going from 1950, where the neighborhood is about 81% white, 14% Puerto Rican, and 3% Black, to 1970, where the neighborhood has become and transformed into a neighborhood of people from both Puerto Rico and the Dominican Republic, as well as more African American and Black Americans coming up from the South, coming from Caribbean countries, and of Asian and Pacific Islander communities arriving in the neighborhood. So in this period, we have both many more Puerto Ricans coming to the Lower East Side, right? Puerto Ricans are coming as US citizens. The Jones Act in 1917 makes all Puerto Rican citizens. So between 1940 and 1960, about a 500,000 Puerto Ricans arrive in New York City, many to neighborhoods like the Lower East Side or East Harlem, the South Bronx, Williamsburg. And then we also see increased immigration after 1965, when a major housing law, sorry, not housing law, although we talk about that as well at the Tenement Museum, a major immigration law, the Hart-Celler Act in 1965, opens up the United States immigration system to people from places like the Dominican Republic, but also African countries, Asian countries, and Central and South American countries, really for the first time in many years. So this is a transformative moment in the Lower East Side's history. And the middle of the 20th century, we see the Puerto Rican and Dominican communities really making their mark on the neighborhood that we now know as the Lower East Side. And just to give you a comparison, I see some folks, commenting just the difference in the neighborhood and in the buildings in this period compared to the Tenement Museum's earlier periods that we talk about. Just for comparison for the transformation of the neighborhood, I want to share this photo with you all briefly. This is Orchard Street. So basically, 2 blocks south of where that other photo was taken in the year 1898, when the neighborhood was being transformed into a Jewish community that contained diversity of countries and regions of origin, of language spoken, but of a sort of many shared sort of Jewish faith within the neighborhood. So I love looking at these two photographs together to see especially how we can get a sense of how people are using the street. And in 1898, people shopping for food at push carts that are really the ancestor of the historic Essex Market. So, of course, tonight we're here to talk about food, and food was one of the ways that Ramonita and women like her are really, expressing their identity and bringing parts of themselves to the Lower East Side. So for Ramanita, there's two stories I want to share with you about sort of her cooking and how she used food, sort of both as a way to build community and as a way to really keep an eye on her children. For many years in the her initial time in the neighborhood, Ramanita was a single mom. And so she is figuring out how to keep an eye on her sons when she can't always be there, when she's at work at a garment factory for most of the day. So her sons go to PS 42 on Hester and between Orchard and Ludlow, right? Still educating the Lower East Side's young ones today. So this is Jose Velez's second grade class portrait. He's the third from the right here. And Jose, he told us a story about, how his mom would kind of have an after school routine for him and his brother. So I am going to share that with us now. I'll let Jose tell the story.
And before she left, my mother would work a lot, believe me, a lot. And before she left in the morning, my brother and I we had to keep a schedule. She will just get the beans, add the little water, that actually softens them up. So when we came from school, we switch on the burner very low, or my brother or I, either one. And when my mother comes from work, 4:30, the beans will be done. And clean the table. And if we burn the beans, we'll be in trouble, okay?
So I wonder if any of you have a similar story of helping out in your homes or with your loved ones. That Jose and his brother, they told us almost exactly the same story about helping out after school. And here we see on the stove this bean pot that Ramanita would use to soak the beans. And, for Ramanita, the beans, in a way, are the babysitter, right? That Ramanita was one of many women who don't have a lot of childcare options and have to figure out how to take care of her sons. Keeping in mind, too, that Puerto Rican parents at this period are really starting to transform our city's school system, advocating for bilingual education and for their children's, success in schools. So we really see a lot of Puerto Rican and Dominican activism at this period as well. So the beans and passing on this tradition of cooking beans is also notable, right? Ramonita is teaching her sons how to carry on this tradition. And you may notice over on the right next to this photograph, the spice rack, that actually belonged to Ramonita. We have some objects that really belong to her. And if we come over to look at this side of the kitchen, you can see another photo of Ramonita posed on the roof, wearing a floral skirt and sort of a nice, relaxed, casual pose. And some of the other items in this kitchen, right? Maybe some of these also look familiar. But this spice rack is one of the most cherished items the museum has because it was Ramonita's, right? This is what she really had in her kitchen that was donated to us by her children and grandchildren to help us tell her story. And this is what then she would, use to add the seasonings to the rice and beans as the boys had gotten them started. So that was their daily cooking, right? Rice and beans, for the evening meal, probably about this time of day, Ramonita would be coming home from work to finish dinner. But Ramonita would also always cook a centerpiece meal every Sunday that she would entertain every week. And this apartment is much bigger than other apartments that Ramonita and her family had lived in previously. I saw some, just notes about the size of this apartment. It's a 900 square foot apartment. It's big. So she had space to entertain, and every Sunday she would have a party. So we see again this living room. Imagine Ramanita welcoming family and friends over and really using her home and her cooking to build and establish community, right? This is a period when Puerto Ricans, Dominicans are having to really build for themselves infrastructure to help support their communities and to meet their needs in New York City. So for Ramonita, these parties were an essential part of the family's week and also a way for her to catch up with friends and family. And, on Sundays, she would make a couple of dishes regularly. She would make sancocho, so a soup, traditional soup that is, part of many Latinx communities. And she would also make arroz con leche, which her family also called arroz con dulce. So that's what Sobeida will be demonstrating for us tonight. And I wanted to just share a couple of stories from the family about this recipe and talk a little bit about where Ramonita would get her groceries, right? This is a period where we see Puerto Ricans and Dominicans really also changing the landscape of the neighborhood's food shopping through places like the shop we see here. This is one of the neighborhood's many bodegas in this period. This photograph is from the collection at the Center for Puerto Rican Studies at Hunter College. There was a Cuban photographer, Justo Martí, who went around documenting in the mid-century period bodegas across neighborhoods like the Lower East Side, Harlem. And this is La Placita. I wish maybe one of you knows, maybe one of you recognizes this and knows what street it's on. I was not able to find that information, but we can see in La Placita's window, if we scroll in a little bit, just how bodegas and these groceries run by Puerto Rican and Dominican families are essential for people like Ramonita finding ingredients, right? Finding the fruit and vegetables from, their communities back in their places of origin, that these become really essential places for connecting to ingredients and also connecting to each other. That Ramonita, she actually meets her second husband, Frank, at a bodega on Eldred Street. And we can imagine Ramonita, in her weekly errands, going to, a place like that bodega on Eldred Street to catch up on the latest news, to, find out the latest information about, what's happening back home, to find out about, potential job opportunities for anyone she might know who needs a job. So these bodegas, they really become, as they are today, right? These are central parts of Lower East Siders' lives. And they become really anchors for the community. So Ramonita would go to the bodega, but where she would do most of her shopping is at Essex Market. And so one of the reasons I was so excited for us to be co-hosting this program with the market tonight is that Ramonita was a customer of the Essex Market and is specifically of Viva. So I want to share for you a memory from Jenny Velez. Jenny is Ramonita's daughter-in-law. And Jenny shared with us a little bit about how Ramanita would make the arroz con dulce, this dish that we'll be seeing tonight, and about her shopping at the market. So I'll play this memory for you, and you can read along with the transcript that you'll see.
And then after in another pot, they have the coconut milk. You can do it fresh from the coconut. You squeeze the coconut and you get the milk. That's how Ramonita used to do it. She everything she cooked all way.
And
She
where would
used
she get
to
groceries?
Grated coconut.
grate the coconut.
Essex Street, right? Yeah.
Yeah, in the market. They used to grate the coconut and then, you grate it, you put it in a pot. You add water and it makes a lot of milk. And then after you put it like in a t-shirt, they used to use a new t-shirt and squeeze it out, squeeze all the milk from the coconut.
So I always love this image of Ramonita sort of using a t-shirt to squeeze the milk from the coconut. And, just this was one of the many sort of cooking techniques that Ramonita brought with her from Puerto Rico that she was continuing here in the Lower East Side. And Ramonita, she, would buy her fresh coconuts from the vendors like Viva at the Essex Market. And some of her products, actually, she would bring in her trips to Puerto Rico. She would go back to Puerto Rico at Thanksgiving and during the summer and bring things like, fresh coffee beans that she would roast in her home, or, vegetables fresh from her brother's farm. So, she really took pride in bringing Puerto Rican groceries and ingredients to her home in the Lower East Side. And she really saw the Lower East Side as her home. She lived until 2013 in this building and always really saw herself as a Lower East Sider first. That when she returned to Puerto Rico in 2013, she actually didn't want to leave New York and leave the Lower East Side. And I just think about we're here tonight celebrating not only the Lower East Side but Loisaida and the Spanish-speaking communities here. This term Loisaida actually comes from a poem by a Puerto Rican poet, Bimbo Rivas. And in his poem of the Lower East Side, he really talks about how he loves the Lower East Side and Loisaida. And I always think that Ramonita would have felt, if we could have interviewed her, that she would have felt exactly the same way. The love for the communities and the diversity of this neighborhood and, all of the life that it contains. So with that, I am going to now pass it over back to Lauren and Sobeida for the part that I'm sure you've all been waiting for, learning how to cook arroz con dulce and hearing some of Sobeida's stories.
So whose recipe are you cooking for us today, Sobeida?
Actually, it's my husband's.
Oh, your husband's recipe?
Yes.
Yeah, so this is one of his specialties?
Yes, it is.
And what time of year for what kind of occasions do you guys usually prepare this?
Christmas, Thanksgiving. It's mainly bigger on Christmas time.
It smells like Christmas. I wish everyone at home could smell it because that's the flavors going on. And we were talking earlier about sort of semantics. So there's arroz con dulce and arroz con leche.
Leche, yes.
Yeah, so what do the difference mean to you? Is there any difference there?
Not really.
No?
No. Just pues, arroz con dulce, arroz con leche, whichever one you prefer.
Interchangeable?
Yeah, they are changeable,
Okay.
yes. Yes.
Are we ready for the next step of the recipe?
Yes, we are.
Okay, so what's next?
So now that the rice rised, we're gonna add 1 cup of milk, whole milk, and we're gonna keep on stirring. You always gotta keep on stirring so the rice won't stick.
You have it at a low heat right now?
Yes, we should bring it up lower a little bit to medium heat.
Okay.
All right. Okay.
So 1 cup of regular milk.
Yes. And then we're gonna stir a good, 4 or 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then I'm gonna keep on stirring and stirring. I'm gonna do it quickly because we don't have a lot of time, right? So and then we are gonna add 1 can of carnation milk,
Okay.
little by little.
And you told me earlier that you like to eat this warm.
Yes, a lot of people prefer it cold, but I personally like it hot.
Yeah.
As soon as it comes out the pot, busting hot, that's the way I like it. Yes.
Busting hot.
And then we add, like she said before, you could use a fresh coconut. But, you know, in New York City, we don't have time to grate coconut sometimes when you're a mother. So we're gonna use coconut milk.
Yeah.
We're gonna stir coconut milk, little by little. And then, to give it that flavor, that kick, we're gonna do condensed milk.
You call it kick, I call it richness.
Richness.
But yeah,
Okay.
this is a special dish. Nothing
Yeah.
is left on the table.
You stir it in little by little. Right?
Amazing.
And then, in my family, we usually use a sense of lemon, lime.
Yeah,
So we're gonna put that in.
I love that.
1, 2 cacaritas de limón. Okay?
Lime peel, right?
Lime peel, yes.
Okay, great.
And then we're gonna just keep on stirring so the rice will not get stuck in the bottom.
Yeah,
Just,
we're gonna give people a close look.
sure.
Yeah, why don't we, I'll try to tip the pot just
Uh-huh.
a little bit to show. No, it's okay. Yeah, but basically a lot of liquid and some rice
Yeah.
and spices. Great, and then this will take how long for the rice to cook?
It depends. It's totally different on the amount of rice that you use. It could be 25 minutes, it could be half an hour.
Okay.
But the rice has to be soft.
Yeah, and it'll have absorbed most of the liquid.
And most of the liquid, yes.
Okay, great. So let's talk a little bit about your family's history in the Lower East Side, because a lot like Ramonita and her family, you guys have a very long and connected history to this neighborhood. So who was the first member of your family to come to New York?
My dad.
Your dad, okay. And he came here around what decade, would you say?
Early 70s?
So he was in junior high, is that right?
Yes.
And where did he go to school?
Junior high school, 22.
22. So that's just a couple blocks away from here, right?
It's actually, yes, right now it's on Columbia Street in Houston.
Okay, yeah, so
Yes.
just northeast of here. And did your dad work when he moved to the Lower East Side?
Yes, he used to work at a grocery store on Ludlow and Rivington Street.
Okay. And so he worked in the grocery store, and did he live in New York? Has he been here the whole time? Did he live in New York his whole life, or did he ever go back?
No, he went back to the Dominican Republic. When he went to school here, he didn't like it that much, so he decided to go back to the Dominican Republic.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. But he didn't stay there for long, right?
No, because he met my mom. He fell in love,
Sure.
and then I'm the product of the love. And then he decided, for a better life for his family, that it would have been nice to come back to New York City. They have more opportunities here than back at home at Dominican Republic. So he brought me and my mother to New York. And when we came to New York, we came to the Lower East Side.
Yeah. We're just going to show a few historic photos of the Lower East Side. So this is actually Essex Market, taken sometime in the 1970s. And we won't jump ahead to the market too much. Let's talk a little bit first about when your dad was living here. So it's the early 80s now. And how would he have described the neighborhood? What kind of stores were around?
He tell a lot of bodegas.
Yeah.
And he always went to the Essex Market because my grandmother used to live across the street from the Essex Market.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
And you were also telling me that your family was in the clothing store business.
Yes, my aunt actually had a clothing store on Ludlow between Stanton and Rivington.
Okay.
Yeah.
So possibly Ramonita could have been
They
buying her
actually
clothes.
they were friends. My aunt's
Oh.
name was Mercedes, and Ramonita didn't know her.
Oh, they were
Yeah.
friends.
Yes, they were.
That's amazing. So lots of bodegas, not so much like today. Today we have a lot of restaurants, a lot of bars.
A lot of bars, yeah.
Some high-end stores.
Yes.
But back then, there were just bodegas.
Bodegas. They had a big electronics store on Delancey. I remember what the McDonald's is right now. There used to be a big discount store like selling clothes and stuff like that. Yeah, back in
Yeah.
the days when McDonald's were.
Right. Well, as the Tenement Museum has shared with us over the years, it was, essentially the garment district of its day down here with all the different clothing stores and sewing factories.
I remember back in the days that they used to close Orchard Street because I grew up at 188 Orchard Street, and they used to sell a lot of leather coats and stuff. And people used to love coming down on Sundays to shop, because the Jewish were closed on Saturday. They used to come and shop at the Jewish stores and stuff on Orchard Street. Yeah.
So we can go to the next slide. How did your this here I just wanted to show from 1988, so you would have been a little girl, right over on Ludlow and Stanton, and you can see El Sombrero restaurant, which is still in existence, right? In just sort of
Just
a different form.
owner.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then you have a grocery store right there with the yellow awning
Yes.
as well. And we can go to the next slide. So how did your dad get into the grocery business?
Well, my dad, when he came, when we brought me and my mother over, he used to work at a French bakery. And then he saw the opportunity of doing wholesales with fruits and vegetables. And he bought himself a van and started going to Hunts Point. And a lot of people knew him in the neighborhood, and he would go to the stores and let them know, hey, hi, I'm doing this for business now. If you like service, and they would say yes, and he would start selling to them.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did he then go from doing wholesale to having his own grocery store?
Well, one of the grocery stores that was located at 177 Ludlow Street was his friend's. And he saw an opportunity that his friend needed a partner, so he decided to partner up with his friend.
Okay, so he had his own bodega on Ludlow Street, which is just 1 block over from Essex Market.
Actually 2 blocks.
Oh, 2 blocks.
Because
Okay.
it was on Ludlow between Houston and Stanton. Yeah.
And this, sorry, we can go back for just a sec. This bodega we have here, the Brothers.
Actually, that's actually on Stanton between Ludlow and Essex. That on Stanton alone, we had 3 grocery stores.
Wow.
We had the Vargas Brothers, which is that store. We had 97 Stanton and 95, all in the same block. 3 grocery stores.
And you were sharing a memory specifically about the Vargas store here, right?
Yes, they still come and shop at the market.
Oh, really?
Yes.
And did you go there as a little girl ever?
Yes, I remember used to go into the grocery store with $1, get a 25-cent juice, a bag of potato chips for 25 cents, and some candy for 50 cents after school.
Amazing. Great. So yeah, we can continue on. So let's make the connection. So your father has the bodega on Ludlow.
Oh, Lauren, this smells so good.
Yeah, it's starting to. It's like
Thicken
at a
up.
low simmer. So he has the bodega on Ludlow, but then how did they end up coming inside Essex Market?
Okay, one of his clients was actually one of the vendors at the Essex Street Market, and my dad used to sell to him. But then the guy owed my dad money, and he couldn't pay him. So my dad saw an opportunity. He said, hey, if you want, I could buy you out. And he said yes. So my dad bought him out.
And so you opened Viva.
We opened Viva we got into the Essex Market in 1999
Yeah.
and been there since. We've been here since.
We can go forward there. I think there's some photos.
Oh, that's me and my grandma.
And where did your grandma live?
My grandmother lived right across the street from the old market,
Right.
where the McDonald's is right now, the building right next to it.
And this was probably on Mother's Day, you said?
That was a Mother's Day. That was something very big in the Spanish community.
Get together for Mother's Day?
Get together for Mother's Day.
Yeah. Great, yeah, we can go forward. All right, so here we are at Essex Market. Before we talk so much about when your family had the business, what are your memories of Essex Market since you grew up in this neighborhood? What are your early childhood memories?
Of the market?
Yeah.
Okay, I remember, and I was a little girl, going in through Ribbenton Street and coming out on Delancey Street. I used to love coming into Ribbenton Street because the smell of the cuchifritos, it was so amazing, like, oh my God.
Can you describe what a cuchifritos is for folks who might not know?
Cuchifrito, it's like fritters.
Yeah.
It's good, fried foods for us as Spanish people. Patelitos, acapurria. They used to have guineitos, green bananas, chicharrón de cerdo. It's everything fried that is not good for you, which it tastes amazing.
Right, of course. Yeah, so for those who might not know all of the market's history, the market used to be 4 different buildings, right? So it stretched from Stanton to Broome Street and was 4 individual buildings. So what you're talking about, you used to be able to enter on the north side of the old market.
Yes, on Ribbenton Street, and you used to come out through Delancey Street, and the subway entrance actually used to be on Delancey.
Oh, okay.
Right in front of what right now it used to be Metro PCS, because it's not there either anymore.
Right. And who would you say, what were the kind of people, the cultures that were represented at the market in those days?
It was actually diverse.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
So when the market first opened, 1940, we had a lot of Jewish, Eastern European, German, Italian immigrants. Those were the folks that were running the small businesses selling, pickles and herring and pretzels, even pots and pans and clothing and so forth. By the time you're experiencing the market in the late 80s and 90s, what does the vendor makeup look like?
We have more Hispanic. We have more botanicas.
Oh.
Yeah, we have botanicas in the market. We always did with the fish. I remember the fish. I remember the fresh fruits, the vegetables, and the roots. The market is a place that, us Hispanic, we get our roots. We get our plátanos, our yautillas, our yuca, stuff that we can, find in a regular grocery store. I think that's what makes us so unique, It reminds us so much of back home.
Right, you were saying it reminds people of the markets that they might have shopped at before they immigrated to New York.
Oh yes, people come in here and they even say up to today, oh my God, I love the way you have your stuff set up. It reminds me so much of back home, a lot of Jamaicans, Africans, all different race coming to this market.
Yeah, amazing. So let's fast forward. Well, before we go on, we have just some photos here. This is the exterior of the old market, and then who do we have on the right-hand side?
You have my mom, and I'm Faith, and that's me in the back.
Yeah. So this was your stall at the old market.
At the old market, yes.
And then we can transition to today. So we moved over to this new space that we're in now at Essex Crossing in the spring of 2019. So it's still very new.
Yeah.
Can you tell folks a little bit about that experience, what it was like to move here and how the last 2 years have gone for you?
It has gone good, but I'm not gonna lie, I do miss my old school market. I really love that block. But the move has been great,
Yeah.
Our old customers still come here, they still support us. We have new customers coming in, new people moving into this neighborhood, coming to shop. So it's been good.
Yeah. It's retained a lot of that same community feel, though, would you say?
Yeah, in the beginning, people were scared. Not gonna lie, thinking that that we were gonna bring up our prices, that it's a fancier building, everything is gonna be more expensive, but it's not. They come in, they're like, oh no, the prices are reasonable. And that's what I tell them. We're here to serve the community.
Right. Exactly. So to sort of bring it all back, when I showed you the photo that Tenement has of Ramonita, what did you say or what did you think?
I said, oh my God, I know her, Lori. She used to be my customer. And actually, my dad and her son, now Jose, Andy, are really good friends.
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
She used to come every morning, buy cilantro, a piece of yautilla, and then if she forgot something, she'll come back in the evening.
So a frequent
and she used to
customer.
always say, I've been in this neighborhood for so many years. Yeah. I remember that from her.
Yeah. So the last thing I'll ask you before we go back to our recipe is, how has it felt? You've lived in this neighborhood your whole life. What does that feel like? What is your connection to the community here?
I don't see myself living somewhere else if it's not the Lower East Side. I don't know. I know when I had my kids, I lived uptown at 145th between Broadway and Amsterdam, and I couldn't find myself. And then I got the opportunity to come back to the Lower East Side, and I came back.
So you have 3 generations working at Viva here at the market.
Yes,
Yeah.
I do. My parents, myself, and my daughter. She comes on the weekends when she's not in college, and she comes, she helps.
Amazing.
Yeah.
All right. So let's go back to our recipe here.
Of course, yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
see, you keep on stirring. That's why I have to keep on looking to make sure this rice doesn't stick to the bottom of this pot.
okay. So it's at a pretty decent boil right now.
Yeah.
So we would just keep stirring this for, as you said, 25, 30 minutes
Yes.
until the rice has absorbed all the liquid.
Yeah, you could if you could taste, you keep on tasting, see if it's missing anything. Some people like to add more sugar, but the condensed milk is actually sweet enough.
Yeah.
But if you think it's missing a pinch of sugar, you just put in your sugar inside, two
Okay.
spoons, whatever you like, whatever's your preference.
Yeah. Great. Well, I thought I might lower the heat a little bit so you don't have to babysit it quite as much. And since this is the magic of cooking, why don't we show everyone what the final product is going to look like. You told me your husband stayed up until the wee hours of the night making sure you got it right for you.
Yes, he did.
So I think we have some finished ones right over here. We can
we
bring
do.
that out.
That was famous arroz con dulce, arroz con leche, whichever you prefer.
You just reminded me, you shared another really lovely memory of your customers that shop around the holidays, and they're bringing their families. What is that experience like when you're seeing just different
Starting in
generations?
October, they start with the pateles. That's very big, especially in the Puerto Rican culture. They do pateles for Thanksgiving. So it's nice to see the grandma come in with their grandkids and their kids and teaching them the tradition of making pateles, especially for the holidays.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because we have everything here for pateles.
Yeah, I know you're a big shop for making sure to
Yes.
get all those ingredients because you really can't get them many other places
No,
in this
it's
neighborhood.
hard. It's really hard. You will have to go to different stores, and still, you wouldn't be able to find them.
Yeah. Would you say, is there a lot of crossover between Dominican food traditions and Puerto Rican food traditions?
It's the same. It's almost the same cuisine.
Yeah. And a lot of Caribbean, as you mentioned, Jamaican,
The
different
Caribbean-
African
yes, the only
countries.
thing that Jamaicans and Africans, they eat more spices than what we do, but it's almost the same kitchen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll make a little room here, but how could we finish this off so that it's extra special for serving?
Okay. So, final touch, we take cinnamon and we start garnishing.
So a fresh cinnamon.
Fresh cinnamon, you could do powder hay. But when you want to do fresh, you could do fresh. Then you just keep on grating and grating and grating. I'm not gonna keep on grating because my hands hurt. I'm gonna show you
Yeah.
what we have. This will be your product. The last thing you will have to add, if you like raisins, you could add raisins. If not, just eat it like that. A lot of people prefer it cold. I prefer hot, but it's delicious.
Awesome.
Yeah. You want to taste?
Wow. I love it with the fresh cinnamon.
Ah.
Yeah, it's very rich. It's really delicious. I personally could imagine having it cold on a hot day. But it also would be very comforting, warm around the
Warm.
holidays, I imagine. Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us.
You're welcome.
Yeah, I love getting the family recipe. I just want to tell folks a little bit more about Essex Market before we say goodnight.
Okay.
I guess, yeah, where are we located and how long have we been in the neighborhood and sort of what goes on here?
Okay, we're located at 88 Essex Street.
Yeah.
And the new building, we've been here, 2 years?
Yep.
I started back at the Essex Market in 1999, which I consider as my second home, my second family. And we're here for this community. We're not going nowhere.
Yeah, exactly. So the market has been in existence for over 100 years. It started as pushcart markets here in the Lower East Side and opened in our original physical location in 1940. So there's a lot of history, and Sobeida and her family's business is one of over 30 small businesses that we have here at Essex Market, everything from fresh produce to prepared foods. We even have a barber and a flower shop. So it really runs the gamut here.
We have a bar.
We have a bar. We have a beautiful mezzanine area for seating. So a lot of really nice additions that I think have allowed the market to, continue to be a gathering place for this community.
Yes, I agree.
Exactly. And having all of our long-term customers as well as all of the new folks in this neighborhood. Yeah, excellent. Well, thank you again for sharing your story with everyone tonight. The connections between your family and Ramonita's family was just the icing on the cake. Really incredible that everything is just so tight-knit here, right?
Yeah.
People know each other.
We know each other, yes.
That's what makes it special. Yeah. Well, I want to thank Kat and the Tenement Museum for this wonderful program, co-hosting with us, and all of the great research and storytelling that they added to our event this evening. And we hope that you'll come visit us over at Essex Market. Come say hi to Sobeida. You're there.
Yeah, I'm store number 6.
And you're there basically every day of the week, it would seem.
Yes.
So everyone will be able to see you. And we hope you'll join us for another program and hopefully something in person soon, right?
Sure.
All right.
Of course.
Thank you, everyone. Hope you have a good evening.
Bye.